And I'm just going to turn to Kathy and David a minute to check. We're expecting procurement to join miraculously at a certain time, are we?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we know what time they're joining us, Kathy?
11:45.
11:45. Okay. Oh, 11:45. Right. Okay. So is everybody comfortable that when they join, we'll finish the item that we're on and move to their session, if that's okay? Okay. So welcome to the Audit Committee, Audit and Assurance Committee, Tuesday the 12th of April. It's the first one that we're doing in person and as a hybrid. So this is going to be a bit of trial and error, I suspect. I want to just test whether the system works each time. So if I don't see hands, can you just shout or wave with both arms? And we're trying to do a lessons learned, aren't we, since the board in March. So we'll see how it all works. So I wanted to welcome to the meeting, procurement, but I will do that when they arrive. I understand that we have, yes, I can see Gareth Levington. Congratulations and welcome to.
Thank you. Yeah.
I also wanted to welcome Jonathan to his first Audit and Assurance Committee. You seem to have been here for a while already, but welcome to your first meeting. So we start off with any apologies for absence. Kathy?
Received apologies from Claire James and Emma Summers.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. So if I move to the draft minutes of the Audit and Assurance Committee meeting held on the 7th of February, which is going to be a problem because I'm just told that I haven't got enough memory to open the page. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. So has anybody got one I can look at? Good old admin control. Close down again. Okay, so if we go through for accuracy in the first instance, page by page, page 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I thought somebody was speaking then. 4.
Morning everybody, this is tech support. I think because we have Hugh logged in on one device, so we have 2 devices in the conference room logged in at the same time is what's causing the feedback. So you might need to make sure that both mics aren't turned on at the same time.
Okay, 4, 5.
So if you could try turning off your mic, see if that helps, please.
6, 7, 8, 9. Can I take those as an accurate record of the meeting? I'm not sure that anybody apart from me was actually at the meeting. So board. So what do we do in that instance? That's fine. Okay. Okay. So it's still echoing, isn't it?
It's good for a second.
Yeah.
Let's go again.
Can we move on to the action log?
So there are only 2 actions arising, and both actions have been completed from the last meeting.
Okay, thanks, Abby. And are there any matters arising from the minutes that aren't on the agenda today? Anybody wants to raise? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to part 2 now. The first item on the agenda is the approvals process for commissioning education as part of the strategic review of education phase 2. And David, are you going to present this, or is
I am. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Llyrydd. I am some. Wait a second, just for us to switch over to translation. Yep. Felly, papur i'w nodi ydy Llyrydd, papur sydd yn amlynellu'r broses cymeradwyo ar gyfer Comisiynu Addysg fel rhan o'r adolygiad strategol o addysg yn ail gam y broses. Bydd aelodau yn ymwybodol bod y papur a'r broses wedi cael ei ystyried a'i cymeradwyo yn y cyfarfod diwetha o'r bwrdd yn mis Mawrth. Mae'r broses yn unol â gofynion a rheolau statudol agig, gofynion Llywodraeth Cymru a Caffael, ac mae'n amlynellu'r broses ar gyfer cymeradwyo contractau a hefyd y broses craffu sydd wedi cael ei roi i le. Felly, gan fod wedi cael ei ystyried gan y bwrdd thefnos nôl a'i ddim mewn i fanylder, felly gofyn i'r Pwyllgor nodi'r broses ar gyfer comisiynu contractau addysg newydd fel rhan o cam 2 o'r broses, fel a manylir yn fwy manwl paragraff 4 o'r adroddiad.
Okay, thank you, David. Have we got any questions on this? I think it's been fairly well considered at both the Education and Quality Committee and at the board. So,
Chair, can I just ask? Forgive me, because I wasn't, as you mentioned, at the previous audit committee, although I was at the board committee where we discussed this. Had this come to audit for consideration before it went to board? Was it coming as subsequent to the?
It's for subsequent.
Why?
It's coming for noting. So the process kind of anticipates that there'll be a role in terms of monitoring progress and scrutiny for both the Education Committee and the board, but not for the Audit Committee. So it's just for auditing, just to confirm that the Audit Committee is on site of this report. Right. And that's the sake of completeness. Which the chair has.
Okay, thanks.
thank you, David. Okay, so moving on to the audit inquiries letter. Rihanna,
so the Appendix 1 sets out the draft formal response to Audit Wales for the audit inquiries to those charged with governance and management letter for 21-22. The committee are asked to review the draft response. We are aware of one change that we need to make to the version shared. Under point 6, there's a query about, are we aware of any fraud within NWSSP and DHCW? And we actually wrote to the two organisations to ask if they could confirm. We've had confirmation from Helen that that is going to be picked up as part of the Wales audit approach to auditing Belinda and shared services through the audit team there. So we'll amend this response and that will show that as the action. But are there any other queries, I suppose, in respect of the version shared?
okay, thank you, Rihanna. Obviously, I had an opportunity to see it prior to it coming to the audit committee, so we've had a discussion, I know, on those points. So has anybody got anything that they want to raise on this? Hello, did you want to come in at all on this?
Just to say thanks for a very timely and detailed response. It's much appreciated when we get these responses as early as we can in the audit process. So thanks to you and the management team for doing that.
Thanks, sorry, I didn't flag up through, and it's actually two places where we would make those amendments. Two questions written to shared services. I just sorry, I didn't flag that up to you.
sorry, a few technical hitches going on behind the scenes, Ian. So that's fine. Thank you for that. And the committee are asked to review it, which we have thoroughly, and approve the submission of the letter to Audit Wales. Happy to do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is internal audit. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the progress report first of all, and then Ken will briefly chat through the two reports that are on the agenda today. So in terms of the progress report, just a few updates on that since this was presented to the committee or tabled to the committee. Obviously the risk report has now been finalised. I'm referring now to table 1 reports 2.1. The strategic readiness for digital, we have received management responses to that report, so we'll be looking to finalise that very shortly. And then moving down into table 2, just say a few things around this. The bursary fieldwork has now completed. We're in the process of putting the draft report together, which we'll be looking to issue hopefully later on today. And the training program director's review is work in progress at the moment. So that started since this progress report was submitted. Just more broadly then, obviously we're towards the back end of the year and there's still a little bit to be done. I guess it's just a bit of a reflection that it's been a challenging quarter. We've had a fair few COVID cases and sickness cases within our team. At the last audit committee, I flagged that it was just more broadly just raising the sort of challenges ahead. So we've had a fair amount of sickness, and I guess coupled with that need to move some of these reviews back into the Q4, and in some cases a bit of a slowness in getting some of that information from management. I guess that's purely because there's sickness in both sides and that sort of thing. There's various variables at play. So it's really just a point to flag that, as I said, it has been a challenge where we're edging towards where we need to be, but we still need to make sure that we're getting that good level of engagement, and we'll push on to get things over the line in the next very shortly. I'm happy to take questions on that.
Thanks, Paul. Questions? Yeah, Jonathan.
Thank you. Or if I can just turn to the two items that are work in progress, as you said, the bursary system and the performance and governance arrangements. I'm just wondering, has an indication or could an indication now be given as to when those pieces of work will be concluded? I think it would be useful for us to have some time scale, because obviously if audit committee is expected to track the progress of internal audit, it will be useful just to have an idea as to, I'm not saying by 12 noon the week next Thursday, but if there is an indicative timescale within which the work is being undertaken and completed, I think that would be very helpful. And perhaps for future reports, accepting the fact that COVID is clearly a very exceptional set of circumstances, I think it might be useful to have as part of that running commentary how on track things are, and if things are slipping, what the impact of that is likely to be. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to add additional narrative into the progress report to help explain the position to committee. If you think that's helpful, I'm more than happy to do that. So in terms of these last two pieces of work, we've got a load of information which we're working our way through at the moment. So I would be hopeful, with a good wind, we'll be looking to wrap this up in the next couple of weeks. I guess we just need to make sure that we've got that good level of engagement. We're getting things through, and we'll do our very best to get through everything.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I mean, we've had a number of discussions, I know, during the year about making sure that things progress and that everybody's aware of the importance of internal audit. And I kind of get the COVID bit,
yeah,
but it ought to be panning out a little bit by now. We're in April and we've still got a couple of pieces of work to finish. And I just wondered what we need to put in place, I guess. I mean, Jonathan's suggestion, I think, of when we can expect those pieces of work is helpful, but
yeah,
it is always reliant on you getting the information and the cooperation from this end. And I think as an audit committee, I'd quite like to make sure that we're monitoring that sufficiently in the coming year, because it's been, I think, a little bit slower than anticipated in the last year. But I think going forward, I think we've got probably, I'm not saying that COVID's an excuse, but less, I think, room for manoeuvre going forward. So perhaps we can have a think about how we quickly escalate, perhaps, to the audit committee any issues with engagement or supply of documentation. I mean, there'll always be some delays, not
yeah,
but
yeah, that's a good point. And we have monthly meetings with David, and as things come to my attention, then we flag them with him as well. So it's, it's very helpful in that respect in terms of turning the wheels. But yeah, we'll work on that, and we'll try and make sure that those wheels are turning appropriately.
thank you. Okay, Kenneth, I don't know, before you go into the other reports, whether I can see that procurement have now joined us, I believe. I think I can see two faces there. So Kenneth, would you mind if I turn to the procurement item and then come back to the reports?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so perhaps I could welcome, is it Lena Bogosian and Janine Crease, who I don't think have been to the audit committee previously. So very warm welcome to both of you. I understand we had a presentation from Jonathan about the new operating model. So so I assume now that you are part of our new team going forward. So I don't know whether Rhiannon, you wanted to say anything by way of introduction, or
so just welcome to Lena and Janine. So I'm not sure who is going to present this report, actually, because it's my understanding that Christine was going to be attending to present the final one, but I can't see her on screen. So Lena, Janine, who is due to present this report from procurement?
Yes. Hi everyone. We agreed it's Christine. This would be her final presentation to the committee. I just dropped her a message.
we can see Christine. We can see Christine.
Yeah. Hi Christine.
Hi Lena. Hi everyone.
Welcome. So are you okay to pick up this report with the update from procurement?
Yes, I am. That's fine.
Thank you. Okay, we moved. We halted internal audit midstream, Christine, because we knew that procurement were joining us at a certain time. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, and thank you also obviously for allowing us to join midstream, so it's appreciated. Obviously the documents you've already got before you, so the cover paper is the standard cover paper confirming all of the single tender actions, single tender, contract change notes, and also obviously anything of exception. There is one outstanding action in terms of the procurement improvement plan, and that is regards to the setting up of the clinics, to make sure that obviously there are kind of drop-in sessions available. I believe they're in the diary now, but I will actually defer a second to Lena and Janine if they're on the call. Well, I know Lena's on the call. Lena, Janine, are they actually in progress now, or are they going to commence after the end of April?
Hi, Christine. I can confirm that they commenced at the start of April. Every Tuesday, members of the team now are present within Tedusky, and during the morning, anyone can link in with them either virtually or can drop by to the communication section where they can go into a pod and discuss any matters of concern that they wish to discuss. So I can confirm that effective from last week, they commenced.
Okay, thank you, Janine. On that basis, obviously with the new team coming in, one of the things, well, one of our aspirations certainly as a service is that there'll be much more greater focused attention on the organisation and its overall work plan. I don't doubt, as I would, that Janine and Lenny will want to review obviously the procurement improvement plan, just to sense check that obviously everything is going as was intended. Can I therefore ask the committee whether they're now happy for this action to be removed from the committee, or would you like a further report going forward?
Personally, I'm happy for that particular item to be removed, but as the committee will know, we've taken a keen interest in the improvement report, and so personally I would value a report coming back to endorse that all those improvement actions are indeed happening. So I would certainly appreciate that from Lena and Janine. Thank you.
Okay, and also just to obviously something that maybe Janine and Lena wouldn't be aware of is obviously the action that we have regarding the validation of the contract programme. So just to bring to David's attention that obviously that session is due, because we committed to reviewing every 6 months. We last reported in November, I think it was. So obviously we need to undertake that exercise again. Okay, moving on to Appendix 1 in terms of the summary information provided. Obviously what we're trying to do is make sure that we're capturing all activity and that we have those safeguards in place. An earlier draft of the report was circulated, which members may have seen, and they will know now that one has actually been removed. The reason for that is that additional information came to light after we'd actually submitted the report. So Janine and I were a lot more comfortable removing that particular line, and we will report it at the next audit committee because we didn't want to give part information. So just in case that anybody has spotted that, it's in relation to Hammett Street Consultants Agreement. So there aren't any issues of major concern. The OG simulators and obstetrics for gynecology, because of the links to the Society of Ultrasound and Obstetrics and Gynecology, we were very limited in terms of the actual equipment there that we could purchase, because it was also integrated into a training programme. There was due diligence undertaken, and we weren't able to find an actual reseller market or competitive market for that particular kit. The access to the Pharmacological Society material, this one is one I believe that we actually looked at length, because there are different elements that can be obtained from these societies, and it doesn't necessarily go to say that just because it's quoted as being the only source that it is actually indeed the only source, but we were satisfied with that one. The control change note for the EDI enhancements within Gwella, obviously with an IT system, when you're continuing something, it's not, well, you wouldn't be able to in most cases to actually secure a different supplier, and that is a contract change note to an existing agreement anyway. Additional air conditioning units, again, same reason. You wouldn't introduce a further supplier into such a sensitive and restricted area. Fundamentally, typically what happens is that if there is an issue, and these units have to work together, so they do need to be technically compatible. The risk would be that you'd have two suppliers in there, and if something went wrong, you'd never be able to get to the bottom of it. So it's always preferred option for those type of environments to keep the continuity of the supplier. Welsh translation, a further change note. I think it's fair to say, and also I'm glad that David's here, is that whilst we've been looking at this one for a little while, the growth in demand for Welsh translation, I think, continues to exceed expectations. So what we're doing is working with David and the team at the moment to make sure that we've got an agreement that is sufficiently flexible to support the needs of the organisation and that it can take into consideration growth. So I believe the team are working with Procurement Service, are working with HEIDW colleagues on that one at the moment, just to try and nail a clearer position in terms of the demand. The enhancement to the overt system within pharmacy, again, critical enhancement to current provision, so it was executed via a change note. This is an interim measure until the actual learning management system that has been formally reprocured will go ahead. The STA for behavioural science training, first submission, no particular concerns, and I know that procurement services are working with the service, particularly workforce, in terms of the strategies going forward. The provision of the dedicated server environment for 2 separate servers, again, continuity of service for technical reasons. So whilst there is, I can appreciate a lot on here, there isn't anything that we would strike as particularly as out of the ordinary. The extension to the CPR training for dental practices, again, this is just a requirement to report extensions and so on. So again, it's extension provision that was included in the original agreement. The transfer and implementation of the Essential Children and Adolescent Mental Health Service, no further action. I think this one was unanticipated, but also to finalise the delivery of work. Again, you wouldn't necessarily want to bring in an additional provider or a separate provider via competition, because you would actually potentially erode the original value for money element. Any additional provider that would be brought in would have to probably start again, which would obviously cause duplicate costs. So before I go on to Appendix 2, which has 2 items, shall I quickly stop and see if there's any queries with the first appendices?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. I've just got one quick one, I suppose, and I understand the reasoning behind some of the contract extensions, and as you quite rightly say, once you've got a supplier, it's difficult to change that. I only have one question, I guess, is in terms of timing of letting or renewal tenders or contracts, are we confident that we've programmed in sufficient sort of time to do that, using the word time all the way, in a timely manner? So if I picked on the dental one, Lubis Medical, it looks like we're progressing with renewal tender exercise, and therefore we've extended the contract. Should we have done that earlier, I suppose? Are we confident that we've got all our contract renewal dates and the timeline needed to get there in place?
Yeah, what I'd need to do on this one is that we have a clear programme in terms of what is due for renewal. Janine and I have had conversations about this recently in terms of how do we provide that additional assurance that things are being done on time, that the appropriate triggers are being followed. And I I hope I don't ever have to come back to audit committee and retract this statement, but I think we're fairly confident that with the additional due diligence that's going on at the moment, the resourcing and the work that's been put into that to assess the level of resource that's required, I think, plus a combination of the team that's moved across into the national sourcing team. It's part of a much more structured environment and a focused environment. So I guess setting aside any resource issues that we just can't foresee as the situation we were in last year, then yes, I feel fairly comfortable that we've got a better handle on it. But also with that additional due diligence that we'll undertake, obviously with David and the team, to make sure nothing else has come up or arisen. But also in terms of, I think, the strategy going forward, using the data, looking at not only new opportunities, but also making sure that these existing opportunities, as you say, are renewed on time. For instance, if it's an ODU, if you're considering an extension of an ODU, you really would be looking 12 months prior, at least 12 to 18 months. That's just to make sure that both the organisation, HEIW colleagues' resources are lined up, as well as the procurement team. Whilst obviously we can't always foresee that events will happen that could potentially derail us, the intention is for lesser value. I might need to defer to Janine on this one, but for something of lesser value, lesser complexity, you'd be looking at least 6 to 9 months before in an ordinary situation.
Yeah. So my original question, I guess, was the contracts register. Is that complete? Do we know the absolute dates when we should be starting the process? Set aside resourcing, because I'm going to come to resourcing eventually on procurement. But so are we confident we've got every contract buttoned down? So in other words, was this one started late?
I don't have that information to hand, but I can find out.
Okay, so but do we have every single contract and the time scales? Because we did have a contracts register way back at the beginning of the AAC, but I can't remember.
We consider every November. So
every November.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we had. So
and that contains the renewal dates.
Yeah. So we shouldn't get into a position where we've got any late ones.
No, we shouldn't be, but this is why we need to undertake further due diligence. As I said, we have pulled one off the register because we do have a concern, but we need to do our own investigation and satisfy ourselves, because what we wouldn't want to do is to report something to audit committee that we felt was inaccurate. So that is, for us, that's part of the due diligence process, but also obviously before I started to present this report, which is why I've raised the issue with David, to say that, gentle reminder, we need to do that further validation again. And to be honest with you, because it is a moving feast, we need to make sure that we are undertaking these checks on a regular basis, because that is the only way. Sometimes things do, we still get contracts that come across the desk. This is not unique to HEIW, where a member of the service maybe wasn't quite aware of the procurement rules. They've gone off and done something in isolation. When that happens, it takes a little bit of time actually to pick up on it, and it's after the event, which is what the file note process is for, because we still have the additional checks and balances to make sure that even if it hasn't been caught up front as part of the planning process, that it will actually be caught at some point. The bi-monthly meetings that are put in place, that's another opportunity. The work that I believe will be continuing with Martin Pennells, and also obviously the quarterly reviews. And again, they're gate checks to make sure that the service is being provided as it should be, and that we're not missing areas.
Sorry, I'm going to keep on this. I'm a bit confused now. So if the audit committee have signed off all the dates every November, and you've got bi-monthly meetings. I'm a bit puzzled as to how we can possibly miss anything.
Well, the main way that we can miss something if it's not been brought to the procurement team's attention beforehand.
Surely
And that is why we have the additional quality checks in place and the gateways for the bi-monthly meetings.
We've got a list that's been approved by the audit committee. That's not a secret, so procurement would have that. So how would it be missed? Sorry, Christine, to labour this issue.
No, it's fine. If there's, say, for instance, additional expenditure granted and it's not brought to the attention or the requirement to the attention of the procurement team that a procurement actually is required, sometimes, you know, there are situations where there are opportunities for funding and bids, for whatever reason, they get put in isolation. It does happen, unfortunately. And then, you know, action is taken which maybe the finance team weren't directly aware of, or the procurement team. It's, you know, this is the, you know, if you're asking me for you're asking me for 100% assurance, what I'm saying is that whilst I'm not comfortable to sit here and give you that 100% assurance, I am comfortable to sit here and confirm that we do believe that we've now got sufficient gateways in place to make sure that we don't miss anything, or if something happens in isolation, that we're able to act quickly and to make sure that there is a compliant position restored.
So, so we've got a list. Sorry to keep on there. We've got a list. If we get additional money, Rhiannon knows about that. If we're going out to spend it, then the executive team know about that. So, is there a step in the process that's missing somewhere?
I think it's generally, you know, communication, but that is why we're putting these processes in place. What I'm saying is that if it's not brought to the attention of the procurement team, everything that is brought to our attention, yes, I can give that assurance of. And if the plans don't go as we expect them to, then we put mitigating action in place. But if expenditure arises last minute, end of year, then that becomes a bit more tricky to manage. And I think for me, that's a much more honest reflection to the audit committee than just to give a carte blanche. Yep, everything is perfect. You know, it's a constant moving piece and a work in progress that needs constant monitoring. I do have Janine and Lena, I can see, wish to come in. So if you're happy, Chair, I think we need to bring, you know, two colleagues into this as well.
Okay. Who would like to go first? Lena, Janine? Sorry, I'm labouring the issue a little bit because I think we need a bit more assurance.
Oh, thank you, Lena. Are you happy for me to go first?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Lena, and thank you, Chair. With regards the review that I've undertaken since taking over the direct management of the work portfolio, I've undertaken a full extensive review of the register, and I've also asked for additional work plans to be pulled together, as this is going to be critical so that we can appraise resource and ensure that we can meet all procurements in a timely fashion. We've also requested meetings with your planning directorate within HEIW, as we think that this is also critical as part of our future planning and robustness to make sure that we have appropriate resources. So these meetings will hopefully be beneficial for both parties in that we can both act as gatekeepers so that we have a full information flow as early as possible so that we can again ensure that we have appropriate resources. In recent discussions that we've held with Rhiannon Beckett and Martin Pennell, we've also discussed what steps can be taken and the audience for potential issues that may occur if, for instance, there is new monies, there is new work that is being picked up and addressed, how we manage that shortfall in resources, whether it's that we put forward a proposal to extend a current arrangement and utilise that resources to plough into new needs that may arise, but for that decision to be made formally and for it to be documented as to what we're able to deliver and what we're not able to deliver. So it's very early days for Lena and I as we go through this journey, and we're very happy to be here today and to be present with Christine. It's quite complex, as you can imagine, the handover, but that is an update from myself in terms of the steps and actions that I've put in place in the early days since taking over the management of this work portfolio. I'm not sure that reflects back on your question, Chair, with regards to the list that was established for the Audit Committee in November, and I will need to pick up separately with Christine to just verify and cross-reference that list. It may well be that I'm cited in another format, but just need to make sure that I've got full information with regards to that. Thank you.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Janine. Lena, did you want to add anything, or does that pretty much cover it?
Very quickly, thank you, Chair. Just our default position is obviously the work starts from a contracts register, as you mentioned, and that's the contracts register whereby we review and update it on an annual basis, and that will be the reflection of our planned work. So based on the contract register, we aim to deliver our requirements with service requirements according to the register, which would be our annual pipeline project list. Obviously, that's how we measure our performance. To assure you what's on the contract register, and once we have an updated version of that, we will aim to renew whether extension or undertaking new tender activity according to the register. However, as Christine mentioned, under exceptional circumstances where there is an urgent requirement for a procurement activity, which is not included in the register, it's not part of our annual planned work, that requires a separate attention and might have a resource implication. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right, I think unless you've got anything further to add, Jonathan, I think we probably like something coming back, I think, to the Audit Committee once you've done the work and the due diligence to see whether there's anything from our end, from Rhiannon and David's point of view, that we need to button down here to make sure that nothing slips the net. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm really sorry to labour that. Okay, Christine, carry on. Sorry. Christine, are you still there? You've got your hand up. Yeah.
She's frozen up. We're still
going really well. Janine, Lena, I'm not quite sure what you want to do in while we unfreeze your colleague. Do you want to take the rest, or do you want us to move back to internal audit?
I believe the next part was Appendix 2, Chair, that Christine was going to take you all through. I can see that there are a number of actions that are complete and others with dates for a new proposed deadline. Now, Christine has the information on this. What I can add to this, I suspect, is that I have reviewed a number of reports with regards to performance, and as a consequence, I have issued a number of actions for the team, and I do have meetings planned to gain full feedback and to advance from my perspective, there are some matters that are marked as complete, which potentially they're an ongoing matter. They complete at a point in time, and therefore they would need constant review. And so I have picked up on these matters with the team. But with regards Appendix 2, I don't have any specific updates, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Janine. Christine, are you now back? Christine, can you hear me?
I've worked with the internet. Oh, sorry, Chair. Yes, I can. Apologies, the internet just dropped out
No problem. Perhaps you could move on to Appendix.
completely. So I am in a place of work. I'm not at home. So we've got two matters that were brought to our attention. They happened ahead basically before we actually realised. One was the development of provision of accredited compassionate leadership programme. We are still having discussions, I believe, with the finance team about areas that are actually co-developed. They don't necessarily lend themselves well to the SFIs, and a single tender action I think would have been used if we had seen this one ahead of time. What we're doing is looking at a range of programs that are either co-developed or funded through different means, which means that the standard competition rules may not necessarily apply. What we're doing at the moment with those is that we're either still single action in them as single quote or single tender actions, or file notes, depending on the circumstances and the timing of which it's brought to our attention. So hopefully, I'm not sure if Martin's actually on the call at the moment, but it is something that we are actively following up. The second one is training articulate 360 in instructional design. The current agreement expired and there was an urgent need, as I understand, for the requirement to be delivered to maintain essential skills at a critical point in time. So again, it's endorsed, but through the meetings implemented with the digital team, then we are working to make sure that all such requirements are actually captured. So those are the only two matters that we would consider to be out of the norm. Apologies for obviously the technical error earlier, but one of the things I guess I'd just like to add, and I'm sure Janine probably covered this earlier, is that following Jonathan's presentation to the audit committee, the aspirations are for us to move from a reactionary service to one that is working with the service and it's forward planning. It has the necessary engagement, but also obviously the dedicated team. Under the previous structure, members of the team were required to actually cover multiple areas. So even though they were mainly dedicated to one area, if there was a resource issue, then obviously they'd be expected to jump across. One of the benefits of this system is that particularly for the team that are supporting HGIW, they won't be called upon to support other areas. Those areas that are short will actually be backfilled from the substantive team that they've joined. And in each case, they're generally bigger teams, which means they've got a greater resource that they can pull on. So just, I guess, as a closing statement as the outgoing head, that I am actually 100% behind, this new national operating model. Well, partly as you would expect, because it's what we've signed off on as a service and delivered, but also in the genuine interests of ensuring that the needs of the service are delivered in a timely manner. And that is, we've made a huge service change to make sure that we can improve going forward.
Okay, that's very reassuring. Thanks very much, Steve. Yes, we were very encouraged by the new operating model. So thank you. If there are no questions, do you want to move on to? Have you got any questions, John? No. Do you want to move on to Appendix 3?
Okay, the Appendix 3 is the final appendices in relation to the Procurement Improvement Plan, as we discussed earlier. The one outstanding action on there is, as we've already covered off earlier, the Procurement Improvement Plan. So apologies, I think I've done that in reverse order. As Janina said, those workshops are already set up and running, but also there is a plan in place to revisit those actions just for additional assurance, to make sure that obviously the activity that we committed to is still ongoing.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Christine. Okay, well, are you attending? Are all three of you attending the closed session?
We've already checked in advance, and we were advised that there aren't any agenda items for procurement, but I'm sure we can make ourselves available if we are needed.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to formally thank you anyhow, Christine, for your work and service to this committee, and hope that everything goes well in the new operating model for you as well. And again, welcome to Lena and Janine. So thanks for your report.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome to stay, or very welcome to get on with, I'm sure, lots of other work should you wish to leave us. So thank you very much to you all.
Okay, if you don't mind, we'll depart.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good option.
Thank you.
Okay, and thanks to Internal Audit for indulgence there. And we'll return to you now. And Ken, I think you're going on the next.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So we've got two reports for the committee today. The first of our two reports is the project and program management report. HIW has recently set up a program management office to oversee all projects and work programs. Our audit focused on the processes and procedures set up by the PMO, and this also included review of a sample of current projects and programs. I think the key message from our audit is that the project management arrangements put in place by the PMO are good, and they're based on project management best practice, and also that would be very difficult for any projects or work programs to actually go ahead without the involvement of the PMO. The audit only identified 3 findings in total, so 1 medium and 2 low priority, and I'm pleased to say that our overall opinion is substantial assurance. So if anybody's got any comments or questions, I'm happy to take them. Okay, and then our second report today is our risk management report. We've included an audit of risk management every year since the formation of HIW, and this year our audit looked at how well risk management arrangements are being embedded at directorate and department level, and also how strategic risks are being monitored through the BAF. As you can see from the report, again, we've only raised 3 recommendations, 2 low priority and 1 medium priority. And again, I'm pleased to report that the overall opinion for risk management is again this year substantial assurance. And again, I'm happy to take any comments or queries.
Yeah, and lovely to get some substantial assurance. You know, it's always very, very welcome. So thank you for those. There are quite a few findings in the commissioning report. Some suggestions for improvements. Oh, sorry, I'm on external audit. Apologies. Sorry, moved ahead. Okay, so thanks for those, Ken. So do you want to move on to the annual plan?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the annual plan. Give me 1 sec. So the annual plan then for 22-23. Obviously, I'll take it as read, but I'll just draw out a couple of the key points just for the committee's awareness. The plan is developed in accordance with the public sector internal audit standards, and what that really means is that it's a risk-based plan. We focus on the key areas for the organisation. Part of the planning progress involves talking with the executive team and getting their engagement and input into what the perceived key risks are for the organisation. We're also mindful of the work that we've done in previous years and more broadly the sort of the wider environment within the health service and the things that we see throughout the year. So our attendance at various committees and sort of building up that picture of the organisation. So all of those things pull together to put together the plan. The detail of the plan is set out on pages 10 and 11. That sets out the programme of work for the year, and we have the set out the proposed periods for the years for the reviews as well when we're looking to undertake those reviews. As I've said in previous committees, and I'll just flag again here, we always look to remain as flexible as possible in terms of our resourcing and what we can do with HEIW. So mindful that things change throughout the year, risks change, priorities change from the organisation. So we do maintain that degree of flexibility to adapt and to move as the year progresses. And I guess it's quite difficult when we're putting the planning documentation together until January, February, and trying to think about what sort of key risks there might be sort of 11, 12 months down the line. So I need to be mindful of that. Within the plan, the second part of that is the charter document, which sets out and presents the arrangements and the working arrangements between ourselves and HEIW, and it just gives us a bit of a clear footing about how we report and the sort of the dynamics between the two. So and that part of the document comes each year as well as part of the annual plan. So today I'm looking for approval of the plan, including the charter. Happy to take questions.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thanks for that, Paul. It looks very comprehensive.
Just two questions, if I can, Chair. Firstly, in respect of the audit plan in Appendix A, can I just confirm that in terms of any outputs or reports that fall out of that work, they will come back to a meeting of this committee?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, are we able? I'm not asking for the dates now because I can't remember the audit committee myself. But just an assurance, really, that the dates of the audit committee are being factored into when the reports and outputs from this work will be able to feed into those meetings. So I suppose just making sure that our meetings align with whatever's likely to fall out of each of these items of work for each of the quarters that they're being delivered. Paul, just going back to the conversation we had earlier about slippage and risk and what happens if things get knocked off track. I'm just wondering if anything has been learned about the trying to complete the current audit plan, availability of staff, resources, and making sure that illness doesn't get in the way too much. And what's been learned from that can get applied to this in the event that there may be slippage in this plan as well. I know we're not predicting or expecting there to be slippage, but COVID is here to stay. It wasn't just for Christmas, and I think there's always that risk that something could knock some of this off track. I'm just wondering what's been learned, and is there anything that can be applied differently? Well, I think specifically timescales, process, deadlines to get completed. I know that we work to certain deadlines. I'm sure there's agreement between our office and yours about what has to be done by when and how information is shared and what the expectation is on staff, etc. But I think knowing what we know now about the last 12 months, how do we apply, or how do you guys apply that to this plan as well?
Yeah. To answer the first part of your question, really, in terms of the timings of the audit committees, we have, yes is the very short answer. We have, obviously behind the scenes, quite a lot of planning and thinking about the timings of when we can do things, and part of that, it does involve what are the times of the audit committees and how does that cycle with our resourcing and making sure that our auditors can deliver the team. So yes, that's the short answer to that. In terms of learning, I think really it's for me, it's always a bit of an evolution, trying to work out what's the best way to address all of these bumps along the road that we get. So for example, again, a bit more detail really, but in terms of our resourcing approach, we're taking another refreshed approach this year to make sure that internally the communications are flowing a little bit better. So if an auditor is having particular problems with a bit of engagement or not getting that information through on time, but the chain of command is sort of flowing, so then we can raise that back to the organization. So we're always looking to refresh that and always mindful of the bumps on the road, notwithstanding some of them a bit unforeseen, but as I said, we're looking to progress and to make sure that we're as accommodating as possible.
I suppose, Chair, it goes back to the old Donald Rumsfeld analogy of no.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the latter category which is more problematic.
Yeah, we know there are things that we don't know. Yeah, I remember that quote.
I think it's something Jonathan raised briefly on the progress report as well, isn't it? It's working backwards instead of the plan. Sort of landing, it's working backwards. So perhaps, David, perhaps that's something that you can take away in terms of programming certain reports in, and I completely understand that doesn't always work, Paul. So I am a realist, but if we at least anticipate, then it probably helps you to put pressure as well on the organisation to sort of
give a structure to measure against.
So just a couple of points. So I think partnership working, which is audit reference 1, that's the Director of Finance's portfolio. So unless that is something that I'm not understanding, that needs to.
Thank you for that. My attention to the meeting, so that should be amended so that it should go to the Director of Partnerships.
And similarly, SLA arrangement is that. So number 6. That could be one that does to it, Director of Finance, but maybe that's a discussion to have. And then sort of Martin's just raised that we haven't got an audit of financial system, so we've maybe done the delegated budgetary control a couple of times before, not audited financial systems, but these are suggestions that we can make to get this plan to a final stage and then be able to agree and sign.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear all of that then, Rhiannon.
Catch all that, because I thought this plan was here for sign off. Okay.
Yes, and it's been spoken through with the exec team as well. I didn't, sorry, Anne, I didn't quite catch all that you were saying then. I heard something about the partnership working. Perhaps that's the wrong exec lead.
Yes, I think
so. But we can check that. That's okay. That's easy. We'll just engage with the other person.
Okay.
I didn't hear the point around the delegated budget control and the finance piece.
Sorry, so it was an audit of financial systems. I think was one of our suggestions, and that's not appearing on this plan. So it just wasn't clear if that is an additional piece of work or whether that delegated budgetary control should be introduced with a systems audit.
We've done a bit of a cycle on these. I think we missed out last year. Missed out for the financial systems. I think it'd just be good to have that back on just for our own internal review. Really.
Did you catch that, Paul?
So there's a keenness for a financial systems review as well.
Just as I think we did delegate the control monitoring last year, if I remember correctly. I just wonder if it needs to swap around. But,
yeah, I mean, personally, from our point of view, the financial systems work has been coming out really strongly over the last year, and you'll notice similarly that there's nothing specific on risk management this year on the plan, but that's a reflection, as I was talking about our planning approach, is that we're mindful of looking at how the controls and the governance arrangements are all bedded in within the organisation, and what's the right target for the risk-based approach to our plan. So, you know, the risk a specific review on risk, for example, has been coming out as substantial for a number of years. So it felt like, in terms of the right focus for us, is to do something else. And I think similarly within the sort of financial systems, that's been coming out quite strongly as well, which is why we're under a sort of a finance umbrella. We were looking at thinking about the delegated budgetary control. Now, if committee feels strongly that then they would like an assurance review, when I was presenting the plan, I did talk about flexibility. Wasn't quite anticipating it quite as early on as this, but absolutely happy to look at that.
Okay, perhaps you could have that discussion offline then, and
yeah, of course, yeah.
Approve it subject to, and I hear what Martin says. It's always useful to have that. Can I just ask one very brief question? Don't want to prolong the discussion. On Appendix B, on the KPIs, I don't know whether it's me. Am I reading it correctly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sixth one down. Is that right? A report turnaround management response to draft report, 15 working days minimum. Should that be maximum?
Yes, it should be maximum. Apologies. Yeah, that.
I thought that was the built in, that I was not supposed
so
to.
That not wanted to sound flip at all, but that wouldn't help what we've been talking about for the last sort of 10 minutes or so. No, that's an error. I will make sure that's fixed.
All right, thank you.
Apologies.
No, it's all right. I thought that was good. Okay, so we are asked to do a number of things on internal audit. We're asked to note the progress report for assurance, note the project and programme management substantial assurance, note the risk management internal audit report substantial assurance, and approve the internal audit annual plan subject to the changes that we talked about. So thank you, Jonathan. Okay, thank you, Paul. And thanks. Moving on now to Audit Wales. Who's going first? Ellen, Avisha?
Yeah, I'll kick off, and Avisha's going to come in shortly. So, Chair, if it's okay with you, we were thinking there's quite a lot of duplication between the progress report and the audit plan. So if I take those together and then take questions on either after that, if that's okay.
Fine.
Okay, so today we present to you our 2022 audit plan. So we set out what work we're going to undertake this year. We also note the impact of COVID-19. Obviously, things are very much changing at the moment. With regards to financial audit, we are largely anticipating this will be a remote audit again this year. But we are getting the audit team in the office for 2 to 3 days. So remote as in remote from the client, but within our offices. So with regards to the audit of the financial statements, we are required to include undertake our work so we can provide an opinion on the truth and fairness of the accounts. And we do this by seeking to report and adopting a concept of materiality. I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of materiality, and we'll report that to you in the next Bit 1 Audit Committee. So the work so far that the team have done in planning and interim audit has gone well. Thanks to the officers involved for providing timely responses to our queries. So that work is just subject to review, and then we'll be all ready to kick off then for our final audit on receipt of the accounts on the 29th of April. So just moving on to Exhibit 1, the financial audit statement, the financial statement risks, that have arisen from our audit work to date. We just have 2 significant risks this year. So the first one is management override. So this is a risk we include within all our audit plans at all entities, as we believe this risk is present in all entities, but we undertake work, as you can see in the box next to it, to mitigate those risks. And the second risk is to do with the Scheme Pays initiative. I'm sure you can remember last year we included an emphasis of matter paragraph in our audit opinion, drawing attention to the disclosure of the contingent liability within the accounts. There's lots of work ongoing behind the scenes at the moment to determine whether this liability will materialise for HIW, and obviously we'll review that evidence and any consequences upon our audit report and opinion. Okay, and just to say as well, in addition to the annual accounts audit, we also do some work on the HIW's whole of government accounts return as well. Okay, so at that point, I'm just going to hand over to Avisha.
Thanks, Helen. I thought first of all I'd go to the progress report. There's a couple of bits of work that are outstanding or on today's agenda. So the first one is taking care of the carers report management response. The report was presented at the last audit committee, and we're expecting the management response to be presented today, but I believe that the management response hasn't been to the exec team yet. So it'll be coming to the next audit committee. Is that right, David?
So apologies for that. I didn't manage to get the report through the exec committee in time. It has been drafted. We can share it with the Wales Audit Committee, but we will take it through the execs and bring it next week to the Audit Committee. But I can just apologise to the committee that I didn't manage to get it through the execs in time. Sorry for that.
And the next review is the review of annual commissioning arrangements, which is on the agenda. So once we've finished this update, I'll go through that report. In terms of our activities for this year, so we're starting to plan our structured assessment work. So we'll be doing the field work over the summer months. So we expect some interview requests soon. And then also our main piece of work this year is around workforce planning. So we're currently scoping this work. The work will be done in all 12 NHS bodies, but for HIW it'll be twofold, in that we'll be looking at HIW's own workforce planning arrangements, as in like your internal arrangements, as well as your wider strategic role in kind of workforce planning and supporting the whole of the NHS. It's likely that we'll start this work towards the end of this year. This is so that we can gather intelligence from the reviews we do at the other health bodies first. But as we scope the work and we progress, we'll keep the audit committee updated. Lastly, that I wanted to mention was that in terms of the 2020-2021 local audit work, it's been discussed in previous audit committees, but we had intended to do a piece of local work last year, but COVID and kind of wider resourcing pressures within our within the health team meant that we couldn't progress this work. So to help kind of reset our programme of performance audit work, we're intending to refund this element of the work, of the fee, and the fee will be, or the refund will be processed at the end of this financial year. I don't know, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Avisha. We were expecting caring for the carers on the agenda, so we'll take that to the next audit committee. So hopefully that's in place now. Did you have any questions, Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This may be because I'm a new member of the committee, and it's possible that it's to do with the way in which I read the 2022 annual audit plan and the fee structure. And because it doesn't give it the context of what was happening in the previous plan, I suppose this is where my question is slightly off. If I'm looking at the fees that you're proposing for 2022, there's a reduction in what will be spent on structured assessment by about 12,000, and an increase of around 15,000 in what will be spent on the All Wales thematic and local work. What I didn't get a sense of in the report was how and why that balance of work has shifted. And I can't imagine for 1 second that miraculously structured assessment work has become £12,000 cheaper, and the All Wales thematic and local work has suddenly become £15,000 more expensive. But what I'm trying to figure out is how the balance of work has changed, if that is what it is, and how this looks different to last year. And I suppose it's the context bit. So I wasn't sure what was done last year by way of that balance between structured assessment work and thematic work, and how the plan for 2022 looks different to last year, because I'm guessing it is different by virtue of the fact that we're spending more on one and less on the other. Thanks.
So I haven't got last year's plan to hand. So but the way I can explain it is that that what you're seeing for last year's fee is what was actually spent. So there might be a little bit of variation when you see what's spent at the end of the year. So we might spend a little bit more on structured assessment and a little bit less on the thematic work. So it's not set in stone at this point.
So, okay,
I can
cast your minds back last year. Was the proposal for last year's plan to spend something similar to 38,000 on structure assessment and something similar to 44,000 on the All Wales thematic work, but things then just changed in the year? Or is it that more was done in one area and less in another? I suppose I'm just trying to understand, is the balance of work proposed for this year changed or different to the balance of work that was proposed for last year?
Well, last year we didn't deliver the local work. The annual commissioning review is the work from the year before. The stuff that you're seeing for the local work is a lot to do with our engagement as well, and the work on our. So what I can do, it might be easiest if I bring back a breakdown of the fee for you. That might be clearer if I did that.
It hit me as well, exactly the same.
Is that, are you happy for me to do that, to bring back a clearer breakdown?
Thank you.
Yeah.
No further questions, no.
Okay, so, sorry, Chair. Shall I come in with the rest of the report, finish off presenting the rest of the report now?
Fine.
Is that okay? Yeah, so sorry, the confusion with regards to the performance audit fee. We'll get that sorted and we'll let the committee know. So coming on to the remainder report, just to finish off with the fees then, you would seen our fee consultation, and in general our fees have increased 3.7% this year across the board, but having a look at what we need to deliver the audits this year, the proposal for your increase is only 0.9%. So further to the detail that we'll get back to you on, hopefully that is amenable to you. With regards to the audit team, there have been a few changes this year in the senior level. So Claire James is no longer involved at the engagement director level. So Dave Thomas has taken over that role. But you'll be familiar with Dave from his audit director role. And then Matthew Edwards is coming in as audit director for financial audit. So then it's myself and Andrew Doughton, the audit managers, and then Helen and Avisha are the leads as well. Okay, so the timetable of our work is set up in Exhibit 5. So the next main chunk of work really is the audit financial statements. That will be our priority in May to report to the Audit Committee in June, and Avisha will be working with officers to set up those structured assessment interviews shortly. Okay, so I think that's it. So we're happy to take any other questions.
Okay, yes, thank you. So obviously content with the audit fee being less than others, so would expect us to say that. Obviously, we had the conversation about the local work that is now not obviously going to be done, and you said, Avisha, that we will be having a refund for that. We originally said that you were going to hold some of it to see whether you needed it for the workforce piece. Has that changed?
Yeah, when we've been scoping the workforce review, and we did see if we could use some of it, but I don't think it's possible. So I think the cleanest way to do it is if we refund that element. Yeah, then we can just kind of carry on with our programme of work then.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we are all quite a good use for money somewhere. So thank you for that. Okay, so are we happy to note the progress report and to approve the Audit Wales audit plan and fee?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you all.
Are you going to go back now to the commissioning report?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll present that one. So I'll take the report as read, but I'll just highlight a few key points. So the review looked at whether the annual commissioning of health education and training is well planned, supported by internal controls and appropriate resources, and has robust performance monitoring and oversight. So I'll take each bit in turn. So in terms of developing the annual commissioning plan, we found that HAW has a clear approach for developing the plan, which it's looking to strengthen further by aligning the planning processes for the commissioning plan and the IMTP. HAW engages stakeholders well as part of this process, but found that whilst a range of information is used to develop the commissioning plan, Health Board IMTPs are the main source of information to determine student numbers and placements. But the IMTPs are often of varying quality. I guess the issue here is that without robust, reliable workforce plan, HAW can't be confident that the identified workforce need reflects true need. And as you know, we've just said that we'll be doing some in-depth work on workforce planning across the NHS, so we'll get more intelligence on that over the coming months. There's also an issue with accessibility of benchmarking data to inform the commissioning process. But again, this is something HAW is working to improve with its counterparts in the home countries. In terms of roles and responsibilities and internal controls, we found that roles and responsibility to plan and manage the annual education contracts are clear. And HAW has taken steps to strengthen resource weaknesses within the education commissioning and quality team. We also found that there are appropriate internal controls for annual commissioning and clear arrangements to review and vary education contracts on a yearly basis. And in terms of the contract and performance management, we found that there's a good framework for managing contract performance, which has been strengthened in the new contracts, which start in September. But there is scope to improve the quality of university improvement action plans, which we found were presented in kind of an inconsistent formats and were again of varying quality. We also think there's scope to improve the administration of the contract business meetings by making sure draft minutes are circulated in a timely way. And also we know that work is going on to strengthen the information provided to the board on the delivery of the annual commissioning plan. But there are opportunities to improve how performance is reported to the ECQ committee, and also to triangulate the information presented in the All Wales annual performance report and the annual quality report to help understand trends and issues. So the last thing I'll say is that we made 5 recommendations which focused on improving workforce information, the timeliness of the business contract meeting minutes, the consistency of and quality of the university action plans, and the triangulation of the 2 reports, the annual performance report and the quality reports, and also reporting to ECQ committee. Happy to take any questions.
If I could just turn to the management response, Chair, particularly with respect to recommendation 1. The recommendation of Audit Wales was quite specific in terms of what HEIW should do. I'm just wondering, does the management response give you satisfaction that recommendation is going to be implemented?
I mean, I think the management response is written in a way which says that this work is ongoing. But I think personally it probably would be helpful to strengthen it a bit so that the actions are more specific, because whilst our report does acknowledge that a breadth of information is used for the plan, the main source of information is the is the IMTP, the workforce sections and the IMTPs, which probably HIW probably does need to work with Welsh Government to try and strengthen, I guess, the planning guidance. So maybe, yeah, I think I take your point that probably the management response probably could do with a little bit of strengthening to understand how specifically that's going to be tackled.
Thanks, Jonathan. I had a similar point actually, which was there was significant congestion. And I wondered when we could expect a follow-up on those from the management and to come to the audit committee.
Yeah, so with regards to that, we will capture the recommendations in the audit tracker. So currently we've got no recommendations from Audit Wales, sorry. So we'll update, and that's the mechanism by which we can record that we have completed and implemented the recommendations. With regards to the comments on the implementations of recommendations and management response, so those are initially drafted by HIW, but we do obviously share them with Wales, and it's a joint process to kind of agree what that looks like eventually. So take on board, but we should say that it's quite.
Okay, so yes, given that the report's signed off and the recommendations are signed off, I think probably when we come to the tracker, then we can
take that on board then.
Factor that in there, because we don't want to go back and amend the action plan. Slightly more fundamental is the point about the Welsh Government planning guidance on workforce and how you intend to take that forward, Avisha.
I think more of this will come out when we do our workforce planning review. So I think that's going to be more of an in-depth review. So I'm sure a lot of this will come out then as well.
Give you good reason for doing the review.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. All right. So is that Audit Wales complete?
Yeah.
Lovely. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to make an executive decision and have a couple of minutes comfort break and coffee break, if that's okay with everybody, and then return as near to 12 as people can make it, if that gives people people enough time to do whatever they need to do. Okay, see you in 4 or 5 minutes. That's all right.
Yeah.
So.
Just a reminder that we're still live streaming. So just a reminder that we're still live streaming.
Yeah.
So, should we got all the case between you?
I think the start ladies upstairs.
We've done it on the
Puzzled.
It looks very nice, but
I'll check with Kathy because I
No, that's definitely a
Yeah,
response.
yes.
Yes, I'll go in person, maybe, and yes, I'll
she reminds me of my younger sister. Who's completely scared. Two younger sisters.
All right, so here we go. Do you need to go back into politics or?
It's not fun, than this one.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, this for example, is fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the range of work I do is really interesting. So I'm hoping we can find out some different.
But it'd be best to enjoy.
There we go.
Okay, sorry guys, it is 12:05, but I've lost my board secretary and my only other member of the committee, so I'm not quite sure where they've gone, but I can't really start because I'm not for it on my own. So I do apologise. Helen's still on. Yeah, Helen Avisha. Where's Claire's moved on to different audits now, is she? Can they hear us?
Yes, I think they're all on mute.
Hi, is it working now? Yeah, great. Yes, Claire's there's been a round of internal promotions and kind of reorganization. So yeah, there's been a little bit of a shuffle around of audit portfolios and needed just to make sure that there's a distribution across Wales and between the different sectors and things for the audit directors. So unfortunately that meant that she needed to move off HIW. But she's still very much involved. Still tapping into her knowledge. So.
Good. Okay. Right. I'm now chorus again. I'm our board secretary, so we can. Okay. Counter fraud progress report. I'm looking to Nigel and Gareth here.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Gareth, who's the new manager of the counter fraud department here, Cardiff and Vale, which provides services to your organisation. As far as the report is concerned, the key points from it really are that on the good news note, there are no investigations at all linked to HEIW. All the days that have been allocated for counter fraud work to the organisation have been completed. Presentations, we've managed to continue those despite the hurdles and everything of face-to-face presentations with COVID. We've done it through Teams. We've maintained that throughout the year, and we have more presentations booked in now every month until September. Our unit is now fully resourced, and we have completed the risk assessment, which we did across several organisations in Wales, on the checks carried out by employment agencies before they provide staff to the NHS. So that was all done, and the report is attached. No, the risk assessment report is attached to the progress report, and they all came out very well. There was only one slight misunderstanding between the organisation and an agency, where both were relying on the other to sort of carry out some robust checks, but that's been addressed and can certainly be included in any requests going back to the agencies in the future. That really is a brief run through of the counter fraud work done for this period. The annual report, asking for a delay on that to be presented to the committee until the next meeting in May. This is due to Gareth now coming into position as the new manager, but also the Counter Fraud Authority have released a brand new 3-year strategy, which we haven't seen yet. And a lot of the annual plan will have to sort of align with that in a large way. And also we're waiting for the final Q4 report from Counter Fraud Authority, Counter Fraud Service Wales to be published. And then with that, we can combine it and then look at submitting the annual plan for the organisation then for the next committee meeting in May. Other than that, I'm more than happy to take any questions in relation to the reports.
No questions. I'm certainly happy for the plan to be deferred until the meeting. Just in terms of this this particular document, it's really clear, and I'm just really assured by what's been contained in it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a couple from me. We had 15 days allocated to investigations. Obviously, there weren't any. What was that 15 days used for?
We used that up in the risk assessment. That took quite some time, actually longer than we anticipated, because we're relying on so many third parties and taking further information each time we had a little bit more information, if that makes sense. So the days that were allocated to investigation, we used those up as part of the risk assessment and then used them up with presentations as well. The structure of the progress report is something that will be discussed, and Gareth, I think, is making plans to meet with Rhiannon to address the way that the layout and how these days are allocated from here on in.
Okay, thanks. And yes, I understand the delay in the plan, but and happy for that this year. But as a general rule, I think it would be good for the audit committee to have plans before the beginning of the year for everybody.
Yeah, well, if I can just come in on that, that will be the normal course of action. But obviously, as I only started in the role 5 days ago, that was impossible. And from my perspective, I would like to be involved in the planning of the counter fraud provision for the upcoming year, because I will be responsible for managing it. So that literally is the delay this year. But I can assure you that that will be done from here on in.
Yeah, I'm sure as a committee we'd want, Gareth, we'd want you to review what's gone on and you know, input into that. So perfectly understandable. And it was for everybody's plans. I mean, Paul and Helen and Navisha will know that the committee are keen to have plans before the year actually starts for everybody. So just as a general rule, I think we've had a couple of exceptional years, but I think we ought to be, we're not back to normal, but as near as we're ever going to get probably to normal. So, okay, thank you for that. And thanks very much, Nigel, for you are obviously staying with the team.
Oh yes, yeah, they won't get rid of me that quickly, no.
That's good. Okay then, thank you very much both. So we've got quite a few items left on the agenda. David's reminding me that we've got quite a few items left on the agenda, so we'll rattle through them now. So review of the annual report, including the governance statement. David.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Yna nifer o adroddiadau da ni angen i ystyried fel yn yr awr, felly fe ddim yn cyfnod yn fan, mae'n cymryd gatan wedi darllen papurau, wrth gwrs yn gwestiynau. Felly pan y cyntaf di papur yn ymwneud efo'r datganiad llywodraethu, yr Governance Statement. Papur yn gofyn i'r Pwyllgor ystyried y drafft ac yn benodol o'i adborth. Mae'r drafft yn cyfnodi ac yn ymdrin â llywodraethiant addysg a gwella Cymru dros y flwyddyn ariannol diwethaf. Bydd datganiad llywodraethu, wrth gwrs, yn ffurfio rhan allweddol o'r adroddiad blynyddol ar waith ac dros y flwyddyn ariannol diwethaf. Felly, mae yna un newid i'r papur, felly jyst i ofyn am adborth, jyst i cadarnhau, os ni'n gallu cael yr adborth yn ôl erbyn yr 15 Ebrill, sgrowch y map, please. Felly, papur sy'n gofyn am sylwadau ar y drafft.
Thanks, David.
I'm happy to do.
I've got quite a lot of comments, so it's probably better if I send those separately, I think, as you say, if everybody can comment. And obviously, those members who aren't here, to let them know that yes, your deadline is, what did you say, the 25th of April.
With a view to submitting the initial draft was covered on 6th of May.
Okay. So we're asked to discuss the content of the statement and provide feedback for the 25th, and that will go to the April board, will it not, for endorsement? Or not?
It will go to main board. Endorsement.
Right, okay.
It will come back to the committee before.
Smashing. Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. So moving on to the information governance and information management reports.
Felly, diolch cadeirydd, pwrpas yr adroddiad yw rhoi diweddariad a materion ystyried gan i gwybodaeth a rheoli gwybodaeth o'r cyfarfod diwethaf o'r grŵp ar y 9 o Fawrth. Mae'r crynodeb o cyfarfod wedi amlinellu atodiad rhif 1 o'r adroddiad. Mae dynnu sylw chi at 2 elfen o'r adroddiad gan gyntaf o chi wedi darllen y papur. Gyntaf bod ni wedi derbyn fel grŵp diweddariad ar y cynllun gwaith seithfed diogelwch. Ac yn ail o ran sefyllfa o ran adroddiad llywodraethu gwybodaeth a rheoli gwybodaeth cadarnhau yn ystod y cyfnod diwethaf o'n i wedi derbyn 4 cais rhyddid gwybodaeth wedi dod i law ac yn bod ni wedi ymateb i pob un o'r rheini o fewn y cyfnod cydymffurfio sef ar gen diwrnod gwaith. Felly hapus i gymryd i'r cwestiynau a hyn o'r diwethaf gwybodaeth.
No questions.
No questions. I suppose it's just by way of a suggestion on this particular report. It's comprehensive and it covers many of the areas. The thing I was searching for a little bit was the progress against some of the issues rather than just what was discussed. So I just wondered if we could tweak it a little bit to show what's being achieved, any deadlines that we need, because what sprang to mind was we're submitting what's the one that Sian's submitting to get the level,
the checklist for
yeah, and I couldn't see any update on that, and I thought it was going in at the end of March, but it may have been there, but I just didn't see it.
It is there.
Yeah, it says that it says about the levels, but I wasn't quite sure where we were on the journey of getting a review done and our score back and all the rest of it. So
yeah, so it is a self-assessment. We're self-assessing ourselves as a level 2, which is a fantastic result given the way the scoring works. Because if you only just fail 1, we're quite level 2, then it's a level 1. I know that we'll be bringing back a report for the consideration.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, David. It's very helpful. So we've come a long way actually on this particular topic.
That's really helpful. I'll take a lot of comments.
Yeah. So happy to note the contents of the report for assurance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the review of the committee effectiveness.
Okay, diolch yn fawr iawn, cadeirydd. Felly, papur yn gofyn pwyllgor cymeradwyo'r cynnwys o ddogfen adolygu effeithlonrwydd y pwyllgor. Mae'r papur yn hwn yn atodiad rhif 1 yn unol â'n rhywle sefydlog. Mae'r pwyllgor yn gorfod cynnal un asesiad yn flynyddol. Felly gofyn am sylwadau ar y ddogfen a gofyn am gefnogaeth o pwyllgor i gymeradwyo'r cynnwys. Mi byddwn ni'n gofyn i aelodau llenwi'r papur erbyn y 6 ar 20 Ebrill os gwelwch yn dda. Byddwn ni'n galluogi ni ddod â papur ar mater i'r cyfarfod nesaf o'r pwyllgor ym mis Mai.
Just one question. I think the checklist, by the way, is superb. It's quite a detailed way of trying to answer the board question. But being familiar with the NAO checklist, it's I can see where you've drawn this from.
Yes.
one of the things that I think that doesn't get captured perhaps in the way that it could, and that is around individual contributions. I know this is an evaluation of the committee, but the committee only works if people, individuals, are making a contribution. And I'm just wondering, and again, not gone through the appraisal or the evaluation process here before, but in other environments, I'm aware that you have perhaps a set of questions, perhaps fairly broad questions for individual members to fill in and say, well, what has been your contribution? What do you feel you've contributed in the last 12 months? What is it you might feel you'll be offering by way of contribution in the next 12 months? Are there any skills or training needs that could be identified? And I think then that conversation about the committee effectiveness as a whole brings it together. But I think it is useful to assess, and I wasn't quite sure if that was done as part of the chair's appraisal process with individual members. That's what it's covered, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, okay. That's the question. Okay, thanks.
But I think it's a really good point, and making sure that we do cover that off in the chair's appraisal, and that it's triangulated so that it does feed in, because I think we cover it, but I'm not sure how well it feeds in to this.
Yeah.
So I think yeah, rather than do it twice, it's the right.
Thank you.
I only had one quick question. Question 11, is that new or was it there last year?
It was there last year.
Because I don't recall that being the chair's responsibility in terms of induction of new members. I just don't recall. I wrote it down because I didn't realise it was my responsibility.
So certainly the answer last year was that we didn't, although we have. But does the I'll show them. Okay, on the second one.
Yes, we just double check that.
Although
we certainly haven't done it.
Although Chair, we can give a much positive. We can give a. We've actually put that in place now because last year
we
hadn't.
have, but it, yeah.
So
we can have that.
to remove the second one.
Yeah, outside of it. So, okay, thank you. So we're asked to approve the content, subject to, I think, Jonathan's suggestion that we bring in the individual bits from the appraisal by the chair.
Okay.
Making sure that we take due cognizance of individual contribution, learning.
Chair, just a very quick observation. I think part of the risk of in the appraisal process is that as board members are being appraised in terms of their own contribution by the chair, very often that appraisal tends to get focused very heavily on their board function.
Yes. And
sometimes the committee bit is almost as an add-on. Oh, we can't forget to talk about the committee, can we? And then it's always a bit at the end of the chat. I think we've got to make sure we're covering it fairly, as strongly as possible in what the chair discusses with individual members. Otherwise, the focus is always heavily towards board, and I think there's that balancing act.
Yeah. Yeah. So perhaps you could have a discussion with the chair.
Yes, that's very helpful.
Okay. Moving on then to the Audit and Assurance Committee annual report, the flip side of this one. It's 210.
So cadeirydd, felly dyma fel ti'n dweud adroddiad o'r pwyllgor. Mae'r adroddiad yma yn edrych yn ôl dros gwaith pwyllgor dros y blwyddyn diwethaf. Mae'r adroddiad yn crynhoi meysydd allweddol, weithgarwch a busnes a gyflanwyd gan y pwyllgor yn ystod y blwyddyn diwethaf. Ond mae hefyd yn amlygu rhai o'r materion allweddol y mae'r pwyllgor am focysu arno dros y 12 mis diwethaf. Fel o'n i'n dweud, a ddim fewn i'r bapur yn fanwl, mi fyddai'n cymryd gantal y pwyllgor wedi darllen y papur. Felly yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor cymeradwyo'r adroddiad blynyddol 2021-2022 ac yn ein byddwn yn
Thank you, David. Did you want to invite comments on it?
it's difficult to offer comments on a report for a period of time for which I was not a member of the committee. But in terms of the overall content and structure, it's what I'd expect to see in the annual report. But I think beyond that, Jill, I think it's very sensible for other members to contribute, just to make sure it covers off what was done by the committee last year.
And I think we have that discussion. I think we ought to ask room to contribute to that and clearly tidy as well. So are we happy to approve that subject to comments from others by when?
If we could have them in 2 weeks' time by the 26th of April, please.
26th of April for comments. Any comments, obviously, from audit and counter fraud? We welcome, obviously, you attend the committees and also execs around the table. I'm sure you've already contributed. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the corporate risk register.
Y papur i'w nodi ydy hon, mae'n darparu trosolwg o risgiau a nodir ar y gofrestr risg corfforaethol ar gyfer mis Mawrth. Ar hyn o bryd, mae 12 risg ar y gofrestr, o rheini mae 4 yn goch a 8 yn felyn neu'n amber. O'r rhai sydd yn 4 sydd yn goch, mae un hen gyfaill i ni, sef y risg o wneud gyda seibr diogelwch. Mae yna bynnag 3 risg newydd, bob un yn ymwneud gyda gwaith cwmpas meddygon teulu. Gyntaf mae un yn ymwneud gyda y risg ar gyfer fforddau meddyg teulu sydd yn trio sicrhau visa. Mae problem arall yn ymwneud gyda ffaith bod costau recrwtio meddygon teulu yn parhau'n uwch na'r disgwyl, ac yn olaf problem gyda sicrhau geirfa ar gyfer meddygon rhyngwladol i sicrhau bod lle iddynt ar y rhestr cyflanwyr meddygol. Felly papur i ystyried yng so.
Thank you, David. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just one really quick question. David, on the introductory paper at 2.2, talk about 2.3, there are no risks with either an increased score or a decreased score. Just by way of what would normally be captured in the report, if, for example, in the future report, there was a risk with an increased score, what else would be included in the report to give the context of that?
We would identify the risk and explain why there's been an increase in score. And if there's been an increased score, we'd also highlight what mitigating actions we're putting in place. It's usually the case that it goes in the other direction, but again, we would confirm that this is the risk that's gone down and explain why it's gone down. So it's just to put it into context.
Thanks, Jonathan. I mean, I know we took this at the board, but there are 3 new red risks, which is alarming, and they seem to have almost come from nowhere. So were they never green or amber risks at any point during the year? They just suddenly become red. So
the process that we have, so they would have come from the Directorate Risk Register. So there's a process there whereby for escalating issues onto the corporate registers, obviously we've got a number of direct registers, and the process is that the individual directors determine whether they feel that an item should be escalated to the corporate risk register, and there's a number of factors that we take into account to decide whether it should be escalated to the corporate risk register, and those include that the director doesn't feel that they can manage that particular risk by themselves, whether they need additional support from the other directorates, whether additional resources required. And the other element would be, does it represent a risk to the reputation of HM as well? So that's the process by which a matter is escalated. So they would have previously been on the direct risk register. So at this moment in time, it's felt that it should be on the corporate risk register as well.
heartened to hear that that's all working.
Well, it's perfect time for that question. We've actually had substantial assurance focusing on this particular directorate, the medical directorate, in terms of the process does work at that level as well.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. All right, moving, sorry, we're asked to note the report in respect of the corporate risk register for assurance and note, is there anything you want to say about the strategic risks? We've had those up before.
No, it's just for noting for assurance that going forward, the strategic risk will be contained as a part of the corporate risk register going forward, so that we've got clear sight of it at the quarterly meeting.
I know I've commented on the strategic risks outside of that. You okay with that, Jonathan? Yeah, okay. All right, moving on to the audit recommendations tracker.
Diolch Cadeirydd. Felly mae'r system tracio yn cofnodi argymhellion gan archwiliad mewnol ac allanol. Ar hyn o bryd mae cyfanswm o 11 o argymhelliadau ar y system tracio archwilio. Ac ar hyn o bryd mae pob un ohonynt yn ymwneud gyda argymhelliadau gan yr archwiliad mewnol. O'r 21 mae 11 wedi asesu'n wyrdd, a felly mae'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor caniatâd i dynnu'r rheini oddi ar gofrestr. Mae 7 argymhelliad yn hwyr. Mae nifer y rhain yn ymwneud â'r broses recruto a detho. Ac mae gwaith yn mynd rhagddi yn y maes hwn fel rhan o'r cynllun cynhwysedd a styrwyd gan y pwyllgor gwaith yn ôl yn mis Rhagfyr. Felly, da ni'n gofyn i'r pwyllgor nodi'r adroddiad ac hefyd yn ganiatâd i nodi'r cynnydd yn y gwaith sy'n cael ei wneud ac yn gofyn i'r pwyllgor i cymeradwyo bod yr argymhellion sy'n wedi asesu wyrdd yn cael ei tynnu oddi ar gofrestr.
Just one quick question on it. Happy to approve as well, but there are quite a few overdue still. I hear that they're about recruitments, but they've been overdue for quite a while and related to recruitment. Is there anything that needs to be done to expedite the outcomes?
I don't expect that they will continue on the. So I know that the good work has been undertaken in that area, and I know that they're quite close to closing off. That's why I said.
All right, hold you to that. Okay, so the committee is asked to note the report, consider the progress, and approve that the green are removed. Okay, duly done. Thank you. Okay, moving on to part 3. There are no reports for information. I haven't been notified of any other business. Has anybody got any other business? No? Okay, so the date of the next meeting is Thursday the 5th of May, primarily for the draft accounts or solely for the draft?
Sorry,
Oh, sorry, can't see a hand.
Can Avisha just give a brief update to the committee with regard to the audit fee, if that's okay, just to clear off the matter now?
Or would you prefer it just written? Yes, could we just have it submitted by email?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I will circulate it to all members. Lovely, thank you. Okay, so primarily for the accounts, but obviously other things if need be, and we'll hold it in Dusky and remote as well. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So meeting closed. I think those of you on the screen need to log off now and log back on for the closed session. So thank you very much, everyone.